Hello, welcome to Biology Made Easy. Biology Made Easy are lessons for high school and secondary school biology students. Well crafted. Now we will look at the lessons we expect in the next 20. These are the lessons: introducing biology, characteristics of living things, 7 life processes of the cell. Then we'll look at cell structure and functions, differences between plants and animals, biological techniques, sectioning, symmetry, orientation, biological drawings, biological techniques, handling hand lenses and optical microscopes, biological techniques, preparing microscope specimen and slides, and then biological techniques, the scientific method, viruses and bacteria, organization of life, differentiation and specialization of cells, cell, tissue, organ system, organism. Then classification, system of classification, binomial nomenclature, the 3 domains of life, the 5 kingdoms of organisms. Then we'll look at classification, the kingdoms of prototists, prototista, fungi, plants, and animals. Diffusion, osmosis, active transport, DNA structure, protein synthesis. In the next 20 lessons, we expect topics like plant physiology, photosynthesis, transpiration, etc., animal physiology, ecology, and others. So we have tall lessons. All right? Now, we want to look at lesson 1 in our first lesson. What do we expect? In this lesson, we are introducing biology, looking at the characteristics of living things, and DNA and the cell. Now, these are the objectives. Students should be able to explain the term biology, list the major characteristics of living things, organisms, explain briefly the function of DNA, list and explain the 7 life processes, and hopefully we will start describing the cell. Now, let's get to action. Right. So we want to look at what biology is. What is biology? Biology, you have bios. Bios means life. Logos, knowledge. So therefore, biology is knowledge about life or living things. But biology is just not knowledge. Biology is science. So what is science? You considered science in your primary schools, isn't it? What is science? Quickly, let's define what science is. Science is knowledge based on facts. Facts acquired by precise and systematic observation and investigation or experimentation. So, because biology is a science, then let's also define biology. Biology is defined as facts or study of the form and functions of living things and their relationships with the environment. Now, biology is not about one living thing. Like you have the cat, this cat, biology is studying, getting the facts about its form, how it looks like, its functions, what's happening inside, out. And not only that, in relation to the environment. And you see, the environment also includes other living things as well as non-living things, stones, water, etc. That is biology. Facts about living things. Good. Now, having defined what biology is, now let's talk about characteristics. Biology is about living things, isn't it? So let's talk about characteristics of living things. If something is a living thing and not a non-living thing, then three main things should happen. One, the living thing must have DNA. 7 life processes must occur in the living thing. And then the living thing must have a cell or cells. So these are the characteristics of living things. So quickly, let's look at DNA. DNA is a large molecule, very huge. We'll look at the structure and functions of DNA in detail, but just quickly look at it there. It's a double chain of molecules, and its function is to determine all the characteristics of the organism. So DNA ensures that specific proteins are made that determines the characteristics of the organism. DNA has genes, as you hear, genes are passed on and they determine characteristics. For instance, this nice butterfly, its colors, its shape, the structures it has, its behavior is all determined by DNA. So that is DNA. We will look at it again as a topic. Now, what about the 7 life processes? The organism must have performed 7 life processes. So what are the 7 life processes? We are going to list them. We are going to discuss them. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to look at all the discussions and define life processes. So quickly, these are the 7 life processes: nutrition, respiration, excretion, movement, sensitivity or irritability, and growth, reproduction and growth. Before we discuss the 7 life processes, we want to define some 2 terms that we will meet. One of the terms is metabolic process or metabolism. These are chemical reactions taking place in the cells of the living thing or organism. Metabolism are chemical reactions in the cell. Then another term we will meet is stimulus. Stimulus is change in the environment which causes or elicits a response. Any change in the environment that causes the living thing to do something else is stimulus. Good. So now let us try to explain each of the life processes, and we pick nutrition first. Yes, so nutrition. Nutrition is a process where living things take in nutrients. See, the blue stands for nutrients. The nutrients is food. It can be inorganic or organic. All right? Inorganic plants can take in inorganic substances and make their own food. And so plants are autotrophs. Animals take in already prepared food, organic substances, and so they are called heterotrophs. Now, the process of nutrition is a process where nutrients, or if you like food, is taken into the living thing or the cell. And the nutrients that are taken in will be broken down to energy and other materials. So nutrition is taking in nutrients to be broken down to provide materials and energy for the cell. That's simple, nutrition. Good. So what about respiration? It's also simply put here, it's a process. Each of these processes, we will deal with them again as topics, all right? So briefly here, respiration is a process where the nutrients taken in, you see the nutrients taken in, are broken down chemically, that's metabolism, to release energy and then waste products. Anytime nutrients are broken down, other materials are formed, energy are formed, and waste products. And the respiration is the process that breaks down the nutrients to release energy chemically. Good. So now, therefore, let's go to excretion. Excretion, you see, is the removal of the metabolic waste. You see that nutrition, respiration produces waste products, all right? As the substances are broken down, waste is produced. And the waste that is produced, you see, the waste that is produced is this green thing, which is removed. So simply, excretion is metabolic waste substances removed. And metabolic waste substances, it can include urea, etc. But then excess substances like water and salts are also removed. So excretion is a process of removing metabolic waste from the cell or from the organism. And the metabolic waste can be waste of proteins or etc. and also excess products. Quickly, let's get to growth. Now, growth, you see nutrients are taken in and the living thing or the cell uses it and causes the organism to increase in size. So growth is permanent or irreversible increase in size. All right? And the increase in size of this organism, it can be one cell increase or increase in size by increasing the number of cells in that same living thing organism. So growth is permanent, irreversible increase in size of a cell or irreversible increase in numbers of cells. All right? Good. Neat. Now let's get to sensitivity or irritability. Now, this is the organism, living thing or cell. Its ability to know any change in the environment is what is called sensitivity. So sensitivity is the ability to know or sense changes in the environment and to make appropriate responses. Know changes and make appropriate responses. So if it's hot and then it becomes cold, the ability for this living thing or cell to know it is what is known as sensitivity. Interesting and neat. Good. Quickly, let's look at movement. Movement is change in position of this living thing or cell. So you see this living thing or cell here. Once part of it changes, it's changed position. All right, and it's movement. Or the whole organism can move and squeeze, and that is movement. So movement is change in position of part of the organism or the whole organism, just change position. And movement occurs so that the organism can respond to stimulus. Very important. Now, locomotion is movement of this whole organism from one place to another. That's locomotion. Good. Quickly, let's look at reproduction. Well, reproduction, here is this living thing or cell. ability to produce more of itself, the same kind, species, all right, is reproduction. So this cell or living thing produces these two. It's reproduced, all right? Now, note the difference between reproduction and growth. You see, growth, there's increase in numbers in the same living thing, all right? Whereas reproduction is the living thing producing more, not inside it, but producing more into the environment. Neat. Good. Having gone through all these processes, life processes, 7, you should be able to sit down and craft a small and neat definition for life processes. That's one of your assignments. The other assignment is to find out the importance of sensitivity or irritability. Yes, so the characteristics of living things, we have looked at DNA, we have looked at the 7 life processes, and now we want to look at the cell, which living things have. Now, the cell is the basic structural and functional units. Basic structural and functional units. It means that if this is the cell, this blue thing is the cell, this animal, every part of this living thing will be a cell. That is the basic structural unit, the cell. So every part of it is a cell. And it's not only the basic structural unit, it's the functional unit. So in this cell, every function that is happening in this organism man happens in the cell. So it's the basic structural and functional unit. If we look at plants, if this is a cell, then every part of this plant is a cell. The basic structural and functional unit. Now, the cell is a very tiny structure. Very, very tiny structure. If we decide that this is a cell, it's a tiny structure. It has a membrane. And this membrane surrounds fluid. And inside the fluid are dissolved substances and other structures hanging in the fluid. Simply, that is a cell. A structure that is bound by membrane and this membrane bounds fluid. This is fluid. And in the fluid are dissolved substances as well as structures hanging in it. That is a cell. Now the cell is a very, very tiny structure. Very, very tiny. Put it down here. It's a very, very tiny structure. Very tiny. And if a structure like this should get into the cell, you will see that only a small part of this structure can enter the cell. So we have our cell structures are inside. Very tiny. So for this structure, we need all this long one to be inside the cell. To be able to do that, the structures that are found in cells are folded. So this structure, if it's folded so much, it can fit into the cell. So structures that are found in cells are either folded or very, very, very tiny. For instance, the human's skin, the cell size is 20 to 40 nanometers. We'll explain what nanometers are, the units. Very, very small. Let's say the human cell is approximately 30 nanometers. 30 nanometers, when you convert it to millimeters, you know millimeters, very tiny. Millimeter is a very tiny. Millimeters, the human cell, the diameter is 3 times 10 raised to the power minus 5 millimeters. Very, very tiny. Now, each human cell has 6 feet of DNA. So this cell is, the diameter is 30 nanometers. Meanwhile, this DNA that want to fit into this cell is 6 feet. 6 feet is calculated and turned into 1,829 millimeters. How can 1,000 plus millimeters fit into something that is so tiny? So they are, most structures are folded or tiny. This is just an introduction. Yes, so now we want to look at the structure of a generalized cell. Have a cell like this. The first thing we want to look at is the cell membrane. This membrane here is a thin layer, living. It's living, it's made up of protein and lipids, and it's semi-permeable. Semi-permeable means it allows substances to go in and others not. Good. If we look at this cell here, this is the cell membrane, the outer part, all right? Simply, this is the cell membrane. So that's a cell membrane. And the function of cell membrane is one, it bounds the inside fluid, and the inside fluid is called cytoplasm. The membrane bounds it. It prevents the cytoplasm from leaking out. That is one of its functions. And then also, it's semi-permeable. So it doesn't allow all substances to come in. It allows certain substances to go in and prevents other substances. Substances like food, amino acids, sugars, tiny, go in. Huge substances cannot, so it's semi-permeable. Another function of it is that the membrane also serves as membrane for some of the structures that are in the cell. And structures hanging in the cells that are bound by membrane are called organelles. So we'll look at the definition of organelles and then move on to talk about the fluid here. So organelles are simply membrane-bound space. So if I have this space that is bound by a membrane, it's called so this structure will be an organelle. And we can also say that the organelle is a compartment in the cell, specialized compartment in the cell, bound by membrane, where specific task takes place there. All right? So that's an organelle. So these are the functions of membranes. Now, let's look at cytoplasm. The fluid that's inside the cell is known as cytoplasm. The cytoplasm here is fluid, jelly-like, largely water, 90% water. The jelly-like is like the white of an egg, uncooked, all right? That's cytoplasm. It looks like that. So the fluid has dissolved substances in it. So this fluid will have dissolved substances, gases, sugars, amino acids, hormones. They will be dissolved in the cytoplasm, all right? That's one. Two, the cytoplasm will also have organelles suspended in it, membrane-bound spaces. This, membrane-bound. They are suspending in the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm is seen to be constantly moving about. So slightly moving the organelles about neatly. So what's the function of the cytoplasm? Well, it prevents the cell from drying up. It suspends the organelles. All right? The nucleus is an organelle. Mitochondria, all that. Okay, we'll talk about them. So it suspends the organelles, prevents the cell from drying out, and then also it's a medium. Because it's fluid, enzymes are in, it's a medium for metabolic processes. Chemical reactions take place in the cytoplasm. Chemical reactions take place in the cytoplasm. So that is the function of the cytoplasm. All right? Good. We've had enough for the day. We want to call it off today. We didn't finish talking about the structures of the cell. We will continue in our lesson. You remember you have homework? The importance of sensitivity or irritability. And then also give a small definition of life process. If you are asked what's a life process, you should be able to explain or write a small definition for it after we going through all the 7 life processes. So, till we meet again in our next lesson, bye-bye.